Okay, it's day 100, and it was a busy day yesterday, and a lot of progress was made. And I just wanted to contrast the direction I'm heading with my reporting versus mainstream media or even alternative media. Um, the reporting of what is the next text message that may or may not be just one person. I personally believe the Strokes Dropbox makes sense to have a shared Dropbox, just like it made sense in the House of Representatives with the Awans, just like it made sense with Huma and Anthony Weiner. So I look at patterns and say, I'm not going to accept whatever is presented to me and eyedropper to me. I'm going to look at the metadata and underneath. And I'm going to keep asking for the metadata. And for all these stories, I've never accepted whatever the eyedropper of information that they want to give me at any one time. And I know if I'm ever waiting, then I'm doing the wrong thing, because they're having you wait for a very good reason to dissipate energy. Typically, when Feinstein wanted to make sure that there was no everybody got their story straight, she immediately released the Glenn Simpson testimony. That is a sure sign of their strategy, is when someone does something immediately that's in their best interest. When people don't do things immediately that are in the best interest of the people, I immediately know there's a show going on. And I coined the term school play earlier on, but what we're seeing now is almost a puppet show. It's almost like we don't even want to invest the resources necessary for a school play. We just want to do almost a puppet show that we could do with one person and a couple of old socks. And the reason I say that is all the information is there. It's in front of everyone. If you follow the money, and even more specifically, if you follow the metal, and even more specifically, if you follow the metal monopoly, which is uranium, the whole story unfolds by itself. The only problem with this story is, much like uranium, you have to dig. It's there if you want to find it, but it's hard work digging. That is the bottom line. And yesterday's reporting is a great example of that. Lots of nuggets, gold nuggets, if you will, came out of yesterday's reporting. And over time, if you look at it's steady work, much like mining. It's steady work to actually find out the metadata and so forth and move forward and look at the structures that are put in place. But going over these different stories, I would say the one continuous theme is the Navy, starting with the Navy, again in a power elite sort of structure in the government. I would call it the Admiral's Investment Club. Contracts or makes a partner of the intel agencies to find out with the U.S. Geological Survey and the national laboratories to get information and develop the technology to develop their investments. And people like Steve Bannon and Scaramucci are brought into the play. Now there's a lot of, especially around nuclear, there's a lot of resistance from different citizens groups, and so you have this play that this whole industry, cottage industry of the Greenberg, Quinlan, Ross type industry of creating either a distraction or some other kind of social justice face for these things. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. If I just said, look, I want to use, let's just say this is Lawrence Livermore. It's not. It's the new gold plant that came out of the Krupniks, of Vladimir Krupnik, that just has been built in Kazakhstan. So, and now we have a Krupnik in Kazakhstan, which is very good because that's where the uranium is coming from as well. If you just look at that and you say, hey, or the Silex plant is another good example. I want this technology developed, this third generation, next generation technology. Silex is using lasers to to separate the uranium. Third generation technology, much more efficient than gas diffusion. Okay, I want to let the national laboratories develop that as much as possible. If they said a mining company, for instance, was behind it, and that, hey, I want tax dollars to go into the development of this mining company until we get it commercializable, and then we'll kick the government employees out of this building, and then we'll move in, and then we'll take all the profits. Everyone would say, taxpayers would say, hey, that's not right. I'm not going to have any part of that. We're giving money to the oligarchs. We're giving money to, the FBI, etc., or the Admirals Investment Club. So they just basically do like they've done in the mining industry for 150 years, is just create this shadow game, this little kind of Potemkin village of different people saying, oh, well, that investment didn't go well. The GE investment didn't go well. GE and Hitachi built this plant in Wilmington, Delaware for Silex, let's say, this third generation uranium technology. Well, we're going to go away with that. Well, we'll bring in Cameco. Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and all the people playing in the organ in the basement of the House and the basement of the White House. We'll bring those folks in. They'll save the day. Well, isn't that really who was at the start of it, the beginning of it? Genie Energy with Dick Cheney and that whole crew of Jim Wellesley and Larry Summers and so forth. Isn't that really what the whole crew was? And the Giustra, is this, and the other repeating pattern here is whatever Dick Cheney and that whole crew did in the mining area, Frank Giustra is just that partner or that imitation that Hillary does of the Bushes and of Cheney. And the only difference always is it's 10 times bigger, 10 times as kind of buffoonish, 10 times as ham-handedness, 10 times as greedy, and any kind of moral limits that maybe even a Dick Cheney would have put on get completely removed for Hillary Clinton. Any way to make a dime is basically Hillary Clinton's methodology. So those are the constructs, those are the structures that you look for over and over again, much like a doctor looks for the same type. Once he knows the progress of a disease, or once he knows the key symptoms, he doesn't try to say, well, it's got to be over here, on your foot when you're obviously having trouble breathing, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm saying in this analysis is so much more important than the news. News is the beginning. News, the stuff that's being reported, that takes up all of Fox News from beginning to end, and that's the closest to fact, okay, is 1%. Digging is the rest, the 99%. This story will unravel in only one and only one way, and that is digging. And you have to go to uranium. You have to go to the people inside the Frank Giustra partners, those 1,100 partners. That's the Navy here, the Navy Admirals Club, the Army-Navy Admirals Investment Club. That's the NATO generals, as I've said before, on the other side of the ocean. That's the folks like Steve Bannon that are involved in the hedge funds, that are putting together hedge funds for Robert Mueller. That's the whole people that enforce this metal monopoly, which is the FBI. The FBI and the constructs the FBI created, like NNSA, and the kind of ripping that away from the NRC. And then you've got to include the CIA School of Mines at the end of the day, because you have to understand the motivation of the folks that are doing these things. So I just wanted to comment on a couple of videos in general. I loved the videos yesterday because it was digging. There was no cheesy, release a memo. I think release a memo is great, and I love all the public reaction. But look at how little the congressman listened. Nobody yesterday got out on the steps like I did and said, we need to release this memo today. Now, there were people that went on television that said that, but literally, you need to have that press conference outside the halls of Congress and call a press conference and say, we need to do this. This needs to happen today. This is an outrage that this isn't released immediately. We're probably going to have to wait till Monday or Thursday or Friday after the State of the Union. How can you talk about the State of the Union without talking about that whole process, that whole attack by Hillary on the electoral process with the FBI? And to understand this metal monopoly, this uranium monopoly, this will go on forever. Because of nuclear non-proliferation, this will go on forever. Key technologies will be developed in the nuclear labs, like this Silex technology. It will be always under the control and auspices of the FBI for nuclear development. The reactor technology is the same way. Because it's national security, they'll always be able to sell small reactors to different governments. The Hillary Clintons will always have this power of pay to play. So if you don't crack this FBI secrecy now with the memo, if they have no constitutional restrictions ever, then all the things that go after it, which is all the pay to play and so forth, is protected. Things like building a demonstration plant in Piketown, Ohio, and allowing 6 to 8 years of money to be invested with these centrifuges, and then all of a sudden saying, oh, well, it didn't go well. Where did those centrifuges go? Following the centrifuges, I believe they went to Iran or to the UAE. But they were, mothballed for a while. What in the mining industry they call it playing the piano, and then they were moved to different partners, pay-to-play partners. If you don't have transparency at the front end on something as simple as a 4-page memo, none of this will ever be unwound. So I see all this pay-to-play, especially with the FBI, as almost the crux of democracy. If this CIA school of mines and this metal monopoly that the FBI has, really non-proliferation monopoly for all time, for the rest of the world, they can do underwater testing, for finding oil and gas, which I'm not necessarily against as long as it's in a controlled method. I can understand a space program. I think we have SpaceX and so forth. I don't mind the development of that on a private basis. It's just when it's done in secret on the taxpayer dime, and then it comes out later, 10 years later, like two people, two high school kids just came up with this, and it's a fantastic rags to riches story. That's my objection, is when it becomes a school play, or even worse yet, a puppet show.